James Burrows has 43 Emmy nominations to his credit and 10 wins. His 43rd nomination comes for the We Love Lucy episode this year of the final season of Will and Grace. I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby. And Jim, you know, you have directed so much over your career, and yet there's only a few shows that you have stuck with in the entirety. I think your work on Will and Grace actually surpasses the number of episodes you directed with Cheers. So what was it about Will and Grace that from the beginning that made you say, I'm going to stay with this show through the entirety?
It made me laugh really hard. It was, it was the funniest show I was ever associated with it. Cheers is my favorite, but Will and Grace was definitely the funniest, most outrageous laughs. And so I used to, for me, it was a wonderful experience to go in every Tuesday night and shoot in front of an audience and to hear the audience roar with laughter. It really rejuvenates you.
You've been on record as saying that you're not really a fan of reunions. So when this opportunity came up and then it lasts for 3 seasons, why do you think this reunion worked as well as it did?
The show probably would have never come back except for the fact that Max Muchnick had this idea of doing a political video in support of Hillary. So we got the cast back together to do this political video, and it was explosive around the table. Nobody had lost a beat. Everybody looked the same. It was just some years added on. But with that, I think Bob Greenblatt at NBC became excited to see that the show still had the same kind of humor and poignance, and decided to let's go again. A lot of times reunions are not any good because people don't look the same, or the characters are, somebody's passed away or something like that. But we were fortunate enough to have all the balls in the correct space.
You've mentioned this cast that's all of them have won Emmys. You know, it's one of only 3 shows where the entire main cast has won an Emmy. Why do you think? What was the secret, do you think, to the chemistry of this cast?
Pure luck. That's what casting's all about. You never know until you get the 4 of them together. I mean, Deb and Eric read together, but Sean didn't read with Megan, and Megan didn't read with Eric or anything like that. So you're just fortunate enough to have that magic hit, that magic, that chemistry. I've been involved. The most of the shows I try to do are shows where it's a group of people you've never seen before. And, the excitement of an audience growing to know these people together make it really special. That happened on Cheers and on Friends. Frasier there was one character that everybody knew, but everybody else was new. And Taxi again, these ensemble comedies where there's no star. And so you don't know you're not looking for this guy who's the star to be funny or something like that. So it's fortuitous if you can, if these 4 people were that symbiotic.
So with this particular We Love Lucy episode, I Love Lucy and Will and Grace seem to have so much in common, even though they're from completely different eras. What were some of the challenges of recreating some of these classic moments?
It was harder in the technical aspects, putting those 2 girls and 1 guy in a Lucy outfit, and then changing them to a Fred outfit, and then changing them back to a Lucy outfit. I think that technical coordination was the most difficult thing. When we filmed it, I tried to film it exactly like, I don't know who directed the original, maybe Billy Asher or somebody like that. I tried to copy that. I know definitely in Vitamita Vegemin, it's totally the same camera angles. They only had 3 cameras. I had 4. So there was one angle that was different. So, I wish I could take credit for all of this, but it was Max's idea, and it was directed by, I'll find out one day who it was directed by, and I owe them a debt of gratitude.
It's interesting that you talk about takes, because I've been to several tapings, and one of the things that's always interested me is that I notice that you almost never look at a monitor. So I guess I'm wondering, how do you do that? How do you direct without ever actually looking at what's on the camera?
Well, don't forget, I started with a Mary Tyler Moore Show in 1974, probably before you were born. And back then there was no video assist. And what I mean by that is you had no idea what the camera was shooting unless you looked into the camera. So back in those days when I started out, I had to look in every camera, well, in rehearsal. And then I had to trust the operators that they knew the shots to get. So you couldn't watch a monitor back then. So I was trained not to be able to watch a monitor. And my father, who was A. Burrows and a Broadway director and playwright, would, on some of his shows, would walk backstage and listen to the rhythms of the show. And, he always told me in his straight plays that he directed, if he hears a pause, he knows no one's dancing, so he's in trouble. So I started by listening. I had to listen because that was the only thing I could do. And you try as a director to, if an actor on the way to a joke screws up the line, I have to be aware to stop before they say the joke, because humor is 90% surprise. And if he says the line wrong, the next time he says it right, it's not going to get a big laugh. So but now in my, I'm almost 35 years old, and I tend to look at monitors more now because it's a lot easier for me.
Sean Hayes has said that you've stopped him before he even finishes a line because he's going to mess up. So how do you do that?
Yeah, and knowing the script and knowing the jokes coming and being aware and maybe being one beat ahead. It comes from I don't know where it comes from. It's an innate ability.
Well, you've talked a lot about Jay Sandrich, who you've said was your mentor, and I think you were instrumental in getting him into the Television Hall of Fame. So
yeah.
Talk about what Jay Sandrich taught you.
He was, when I first came out in 1974, I was brought out to do one episode of a show at MTM, and they had Mary Tyler Moore and Bob Newhart and Rhoda and the Paul Sand Show. So I knew I was going to do one episode. And they put me in, so I had to watch because there's some technical ability needed to direct a multi-camera sitcom. You have to learn how to move the cameras and so that they capture the intent and the humor of the show. And so I watched Jay, and Jay was very sweet with me then, and he allowed me to ask questions. And it was at a time that Jay was just getting divorced from his first wife, and so we started to hang out together, and we became very, very close. And in fact, his wife now was my first wife's best friend. So we have many interconnections. And when I was watching in the 60s and the early 70s, when it said directed by, it always was Jay Sandrich. So to me, he was God. And to be able to become his friend and be able now for the Television Academy to enable him to be inducted into it was just a thrill for me.
You've been at the forefront of so many sitcoms, and the idea of a fourth camera coming in, and yet there seems to be all this talk about the quote unquote death of the multi-camera sitcom, and that's been such a huge part of your entire career. So what do you think about all that talk?
I've been at the funeral for the Multicamera sitcom many times. Don't forget, in '81 it was over because of MASH, and that nobody was doing multi-camera sitcoms, and all of a sudden we had Cheers and Family Ties, and then that was okay, but then Cosby came and everything became multi-camera again. So I've been, I've broken out my dark suit a number of times and followed the hearse, but as long as we have people like Chuck Lorre around, this form is not going to die.
That's interesting. Why do you say Chuck Lorre is at the forefront?
Because he loves it. He loves it. I mean, single camera comedies, and this is not disparaging, but the single camera comedy, when you're shooting a scene, it has to make the writer laugh and the director laugh. Multi-camera comedy has to make a full audience of 250 people laugh. So I think the jokes have to be better and harder. And we love that. We love, on shows, when you run every scene twice in front of an audience, and if the first time the joke doesn't work, you go back and rewrite the joke. And so that's the form that I love, and that's the form that Chuck Lorre loves.
You've done a large number of pilots, and some you stay with, some you don't. But what is it about a pilot that attracts you? What hooks you in to deciding to direct a pilot?
Well, of course, I read the script first, and for me, it's not the idea that I'm attracted to. It's the execution of the idea. You take, for example, take a show like Cheers, which is, the idea is a bar in Boston. Well, and that's not a high concept idea, but how the Charles brothers executed that is what made it so special. You have 6 young people sitting around a coffee house. Not a great concept, but it's the execution of the idea. I mean, maybe the highest concept show I ever did was Third Rock from the Sun. And, I did that because of Lithgow. I always wanted to work with John. But that, again, they executed. That was a high concept idea that they executed. But most of the shows I do, I read scripts. Again, the idea is not that important to me. It's the particular execution of the idea.
You said something earlier that I think is really interesting, is that you prefer to cast unknowns on a series rather than stars. Why is that?
Again, when you have a star in a show, when you cut to them, you know they're going to be funny. When you have somebody you've never seen before and you cut to them, you have no idea what's going to happen, or what they're going to say, as you wouldn't with a star. But the surprise of an unknown person is enhanced 50% because you didn't know what to expect. So that's why I rarely do shows that have stars in them. I just, again, it's, you know the path. You know the path in the shows. In Cheers, that we had 10 cast members. You didn't know where the joke was coming from, or and when you cut to somebody, oh my God, after a while, Cliff Clavin, when you cut to him, the audience already started to titter because they know it. But in the beginning, it's the excitement of having unknowns, and you as a creator creating people who become stars, and that's very enamoring to me.
I also wanted to bring up the change in platforms. Do you think with all these new platforms like Netflix and streaming and all those, does that enhance your creative opportunity?
Yeah, it does. It's sure. A lot more people can create. back in the 70s, there were 30 great writers in television, and there were 3 networks. Right now, there are 30 great writers in television, and there are 500 networks. The amount of great creativity doesn't change. What happens is it gets dispersed. And you have people here now doing shows who have, don't have the cojones to do a show, but they're still out there, and, they can go on a streaming service, and it can amuse some people and become iconic that way. But back in the day, you had to have a hit to stay on the air. You don't have to have that anymore. So shows now, it's much more diverse. There are a lot of pigeonhole shows where people watch these because it's interesting. Cheers was never interesting. Cheers was funny. Will and Grace was funny. Cosby was funny. Seinfeld was funny. They were not interesting. So I think, again, there are probably the same amount of really funny shows on the air in the 70s that is on the air now.
Do you actually miss the way that it used to be, or do you think you prefer the current time period over the time period that you came up in?
Well, in the time of Corona, it's better that there's all this streaming. But I miss the way it was. I miss the people who were in charge back then, especially of the networks. I miss Grant Tinker, who was a champion of the writer and the director. I miss Brandon Tartikoff, who was also the same way. They trusted the writer, they trusted the director. Now everybody seems to know what they're doing, and the work is not. There's a lot more work, and it's just not as good. So I do miss the old days when you had like Stu Bloomberg at ABC and Tom and Marcy at ABC, and I miss that. I miss those guys who were creative as well as being great executives.
Well, Jim Burrows, good luck at the Emmys. It was a real pleasure to talk to you. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys, and stay tuned for more interviews throughout the season. Jim Burrows, congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tony.